Hey, how you guys doing? My name is Christina Faith. I am your co-host. This is
A Brilliant Dummy.
A Brilliant Dummy. And we are Alotta Hats podcast. Today we are going to be talking about spiritual abuse. This is a trigger warning. If you are in a space where you have not dealt with your spiritual abuse, you're in a spiritual abuse situation at a church or in an organization, this is your warning. This episode may not be for you. It's triggering, guys. It's triggering for us as well. And so if it's too much for you today, we really want you, take your time and come back to the episode when you need to contact a therapist. Don't rush into an episode like this unless you need it right now. And so let's dive into this, the complexities of spiritual abuse and the deep effects. And one of the things that we really have to be really mindful of is that spiritual abuse is an attack on your entire being and the very essence of the being that you have, which is spiritual, which is where God lives. Like, God lives in our entire being. But one of the things about spiritual abuse is that it attacks the place that should be safe. Romans 16:17 is a clear indication for us that abuse is possible, but the whole Bible is about places that spiritual abuse has existed. And Romans 16:17 says, "Now I urge you, brethren, keep your eye on those who cause dissension and hindrances contrary to the teaching which you learn, and turn away from them." Now, the funny thing about this text is that in spiritual abuse, this text can be used against you
Right.
as well.
Exactly.
And so it's really important to have an open heart to the Lord, because spiritual abuse is all about psychological warfare. Mm-hmm. And so, Tiayrra, you want to, what is spiritual abuse?
So we just want to give like a kind of clear working definition, so that we're just not throwing stuff out here. And by any means are we experts in this stuff?
Not expert at all.
We're learning every day, but and we'll have resources in the comments and stuff for you to dig deeper. But kind of the working definition is the mistreatment of a person who is in need of help, support, or greater spiritual empowerment, with the result of weakening, undermining, or decreasing that person's spiritual empowerment. And that is kind of a definition from a book called The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse, which is definitely that's great resource.
That's your first. Besides like articles and some YouTube videos, like to really dig in, that is the key. She put my journey first. I gotta go first. I gotta get triggered first. I'm being triggered for the last 3 weeks like crazy. Man, I don't even know where to start. So this is where I can start, because the churches that I went to prior were not spiritually abusive churches. They had levels of unhealthiness in some of them, but nothing like what I ended up in. And so, but in the midst of that, joining this specific church was me trying to find a church to truly grow in. Like, when you are a person who's outspoken like I am, and you're able to do a lot, and you have a lot of gifting, people just generally throw you in places. So this church they said they didn't care about my giftings in regard, but said, character is more important. So they put a really big emphasis on character. It was a little bit different. I'm in seminary with my pastor. We're having certain classes together. It was just a weird experience.
Wow. Wait, so the church you were at, you were in seminary with the pastor?
I didn't know it. Yeah, I didn't know it initially.
Oh, wow.
So, dang, okay, is this how I got to this church? Hold on. I'm trying to, okay, so I don't, this is years ago. Yeah. So I ended up at the church because this girl that I met in seminary, she had invited me to a Bible study, right? And it wasn't the church. It was another Bible study. It was just an independent Bible study. A bunch of believers are getting together in the projects behind Temple, right? I don't know if the projects are still there. But it was like 12 of us in this tiny little apartment. We were just praying. The prophecy was going forth. It was very accurate. There was this pastor who was leading it. He was just starting his church type thing. I knew I wasn't going to join this church. I was in between, but I knew I wasn't going to join his church. And it was just really good. And then next thing I know, kind of like one by one, we all got invited to the church I ended up at. Okay. And so she was the one who actually introduced me to them. Now, one of the things I'll say is I was enamored, in a sense, by the maturity that she seemed to have. right? And she had just joined this church recently, but she postured herself in a way that she was more spiritually mature than me. And so oftentimes I think what happens is we're desiring something that we desire to attain. Like I desire to be spiritually mature. Right. And so I'm following them in a sense. So one by one, me and this group of young believers, I think we were like 24, 25, we all started to join this church. So she joined. He was like, oh, okay. And so back in the day, you know, some churches, if you join, you go up and then that's how you will find out. We didn't know that they were joining. This church, the worship was intoxicating. Like it was I joined when it was like really thriving, when we were outgrowing the building we were in. It was like, everyone was bringing between 5 to 10 people a week. Wow. Individually. Wow. Like maybe 2 to 3, but it was like, and then, you know, they'd be like, hey, who you come with? And everybody would stand up. Right. Like we were just, it was like, one of the guys, he explained to me, he was like, it was almost like we had the 94, 96, 97, 98 Bulls. Like just a group of really hungry young believers, many who had already been in the faith for a while. Like I had been in the faith 7 years already or something like that. Maybe 4 or 5 years. And I was really grounded. I'd never fallen. Like I just loved Jesus. And I wasn't legalistic at this point, right? So we joined the church, and then the next guy who was a part of our group, he joined the church. And I had become really close to this other girl that was a part of the group, the 4 of us. And we were on the phone talking. It's like, yeah, it just something seems off. Something seemed weird. Feel a little cultish to me. And so we kind of like ignored it. I then get a phone call from my mentor, and she's like, hey, because she knew the pastor because she was in seminary with us, right? So seminary is different, right? Seminary is not like college. You know, you can be 21 in seminary, but you're in class with people who are 50, 60 years old, right? So people who've been around for a long time, they've probably been serving in ministry. And she was like, you know, I really feel like the Lord, because I had been jumping from churches. I was about to start one. There was all kinds of stuff going on. And I didn't really want to start a church. I just wanted to start something that was authentic for young people. And so she's like, I don't think that's, you know, what you should do right now. You need to kind of like settle for a little bit. She's like, I feel like the Lord is saying for you to join this church for 3 years. Go get discipled and leave. I cried when she said that because I did not want to join this church. Wow. In my soul, I did not.
So you had like a gut feeling.
I had a good feeling. Now, if I would have done what she had said, I would not have experienced the level of spiritual abuse that I did, right? The first 3 years was all right, y'all. You know, there were inklings of stuff. Yeah. Like we knew some things wasn't right. But it was kind of like, oh, that's character flaws type stuff. Yeah. You know, she screamed at you a little bit, but then she apologized. It was weird. Whoa. But it was weird. It wasn't.
She screamed a little bit. They was screaming.
She would rebuke you. Right. Okay. Rebuke, aka scream at you.
Oh wow.
And so what happened was, the reason I kind of like probably got even deeper in it is because at the same time God was developing my creative gifting, right? I was shooting. I was just kind of like learning how to shoot, and I had plenty of money because I was a social worker, and it was just good. Like I've always been a giver. Here you go, right? Type thing. And so she noticed some of my giftings. She found that I had a studio at home. And so she's like, hey, I want you on the sound. I remember the day she was like, yeah, I want you on the sound team. And I was like, all right, yeah, sure. That was the setup. The worship team is the setup. Wow. Like in that church, the worship team was the setup. Wow. It was the biggest worship team, like not the biggest, but it was like 15 people on the worship team. Oh, wow. 15, 20 people between musicians on the worship team. Okay. And so the worship team was almost like that. So in spiritual abuse churches, it's like levels of circles, right? You have your regular people, then you have the people who serve faithfully, but then you have the people close to leadership. Well, in more of the ministries that have to be used every week, like worship teams and stuff like that. And then you have leadership, right? And then you have the pastors and, you know, whoever the leaders are, their inner circle. And so over the years, I went from like this. Yeah. Like, one day she decides that we need accountability partners at worship team. And so she assigns everybody to have accountability partners.
They were assigned?
Assigned. She was controlling as, Lord forgive, I'm sorry, y'all. She was controlling as hell. Yeah. It's really no other way to say it. But then she gets to me and she says, I'm going to be your accountability partner. And I was like, I was like, all right. And so being her accountability partner, man, I'm not fully going to be accountable because I still don't trust. I don't trust you no way, and I know you're not going to be accountable to me for nothing, right? And so that was kind of like the first step of that.
So you had these along the way. Along the way, I had trust.
Man. Okay, along the way, I had the and so I ended up being there for 9 years, and probably my family knew it was a cult almost immediately. And so then probably I think when I started to kind of like see something really ain't right, I had just graduated seminary, and I started to work. But what drove me deeper, before I say that, what drove me deeper was I had left my job, right, to pursue filmmaking, right, and writing. And because of that, as soon as she discovers that you got free time, she's always starting to pull on your time, quote unquote, affirming your gifts and wanting to be used. I had to get permission to go work for people.
Oh, wow.
Like if there's worship rehearsal on Saturday, in order to miss it, I got to call and say, hey, can I take this gig? Right? Wow. Now, mind you, this is my only form of income, but I'm having to call. So we have Monday night prayer, Wednesday night Bible study, Thursday night worship rehearsal. Every other Friday, there was women's fellowship, Saturday worship rehearsal, Sunday church. This church, we would get there. Oh yeah. Then we had to be there at 7 a.m. for prayer on Sunday if you were on the worship team. Service don't start till 11. They not feed. Matter of fact, thank you to my current church who feed. It's like one of the greatest things I appreciate the little stuff. Yeah. Like the people who serve all 3 services or one service, they feed the people who serve. Never got fed. You got to bring your food.
So were they paying you though?
No, they never. I never seen anybody on payroll except for the admin. Wow. Right. Okay. And then so I'm in seminary, right? And when I'm in seminary, like I'm being called to preach, right, from different churches and stuff. They tell me I can't take any of that stuff. You're not ready. You're chasing the pulpit. And I'm like, I didn't even ask. Like, people are asking me. Yeah. But then when I was in seminary, a lot of stuff started to happen. Like, a couple times she tried to get me to not complete seminary, like, take a break. Right. Why are you rushing? I'm like, sis, like, I just did 3 years part-time. Like, I'm trying to finish. Right. Like, I don't want to keep this going. Right. Right. And so I'm fighting because I'm like, I'm not listening to you on that. I'm going to keep going to school. But when I'm in seminary, you're supposed to go to another church, right? Serve in another church while you're in seminary.
Bless you.
And so while I'm trying to, so they have mind controlled me so much that I come up with a way to serve at my own local church, right? As opposed to going someplace else, right? Because I'm faithful. My pastor would always say, seminary doesn't change anything. You're still going to be here, and I believed it. I would be told stuff like, don't talk to, if other leaders come in and they see you serving or something like that, don't talk to them. Things like, don't let nobody take you from here type stuff, right? Because people, when you have certain gifting, church would be like, yo, you think about moving? Right? We got a salary for you, right? And so in my mind, now when I started seminary, this was not in my plan. My plan was simply to go get equipped so that I can go wherever the Lord wanted me to go, right? And for years, I wanted to serve in a church for the media specifically, right? Because that's where, probably for the first 9 or 10 years almost of my media life, I served the local churches. Like not even just theirs, but others. And so it just became overwhelming. And then once I graduated seminary, it took me 5 years to graduate because I did 3 years part-time, 2 years full-time. And when I graduated seminary, I started to dig even more like in grace. I've always had a nice, grasp of the word of God. And so I would read stuff and I'd be like, no, this ain't right. Like I'll be in service. Like I'll be in service and I can start tracking how many times you use the illustration, how many times you've used this text. Oh, you're out of context in this text. Right. Like, because I've been trained to study. Right. And even before then, I'm always reading and consuming some form of theology. And so, it was crazy. Like, it was crazy. And so I graduated and I got this book on grace. And I had books on grace before, but it was something about this particular book on grace that challenged a lot of the things in that particular church, but in Christianity in general. Like, are we operating in grace or are we operating in legalism and works? And so that was my first, okay, I got to get out of here. And so I hadn't told anybody, you know, I had kind of like distanced myself from the church in a sense because I'm working now. So she's not, you know, her and her husband don't have a huge hold on my time. And so as I'm kind of like going, end up meeting my husband, he ends up moving here. And first question, he's like, so when we leaving? Like, how long we gonna be here? And in the beginning, I wasn't ready to go, but I hit this like, it's time to go. Yeah. And then I talked to one of my friends that I came in with, and he talked me back into it. No, things can change. We must be the change. You know, we're not called to abandon the church. You know, what is going to another church gonna do? So, y'all, I'm stuck again. And so I'm stuck again. And then that was in 2011. Long story short, it got worse and worse. Now, mind you, they also are a money grab. We call it the money grab. Let me tell you, they got a offer.
Oh, they didn't do the money come to me now, did they?
No, they would.
Okay,
they would do,
I did go to a church that.
No, they would do like, we're asking everybody to give $1,000 to the building fund.
Okay.
We're asking everybody to give $5,000 to change in the building. Yeah. Right now, mind you, the stuff hardly ever got done. Right. And then we raised all this money. The last time when me and my husband finally left, they had done like a building fund that we had to raise like $100,000 for this building to change this building. We ended up doing the work. I was like, what did we give all this money for if we're doing the work? Right. To offset the cost. Right.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot of similarities.
And now that I've built things, now I know how much stuff costs. And I'm like, yeah, stuff is expensive, but why are we doing this? Right. Wow. Like, we're doing a demolition. We're doing an actual installation. Okay. So, because I can keep going.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because this is resonating.
No, it's ridiculous. Wow. And so, a big portion of it for me was control of time, control of mind. Like, I remember one of my friends early on, he was like, yo, it's weird because now when I pray, I only hear her voice. And so that's a form of mind control, right? Wow. And so it's almost like in your mind, you talking to Jesus, but the response that you get is her or him or things that they've programmed you to think. So, and even the way you look at the scriptures, you're told, you know, I often had problems at this church all the time. Like people, my friends would be like, yo, you just like getting in trouble? I was like, no, I got questions. Like, I don't understand like why some of this stuff happens. And they was like, yo, you just need to chill. And I'm like, chill for what? Like, I ain't the problem. And so I would always ask questions, which would then cause her to always pull me in. Oh, you need to be discipled. So you're always getting pulled in on this. You need to be discipled. And I'm like, well, how long? Oh, and then you can't disciple anybody. So I was one of the people that couldn't disciple anybody. Okay. Now, mind you, everyone is at my house all the time. I'm discipling these people. Yeah, you right? Are. When they have issues and they have, concerns, they're coming to me. She hated that. And so, like, you would get, like, and I had a studio. And so people, like, we had started, like, it was just a lot of goodness happening, but she wanted to control it. So we started the music label, right? And we wrote real deep. It was great. Like, it was great music being produced. We were pushing out stuff. Next thing you know, we getting pulled into her, she calls us all over and says, who's the head? And we was like, well, we both started together. No, somebody needs to be the head. And I'm looking like, now this is her son. And she was like, he'll be the head. And I'm like, but we're using all my stuff and all my money. Right. He ain't got nothing. Right. He got talent, but he ain't got nothing. Right? All right, submit. Then she tells us, submit. You hear that, right? Then she tells us, you guys need to submit to a year of discipleship. Not take any shows, not do anything musically, just read the word of God. She had us in the book of Romans for a year and never got out of Romans 1. Because she would always tell you we got to read this stuff. She never read nothing, y'all. She would just read other people's works and regurgitate them as though they were hers. And then start asking mad questions and go off on tangents. Okay. Her husband would do the same thing. He used the same scriptures over and over, regurgitate, same illustrations. It was always, you can't, you aren't, what are you doing? God, do you want God to be pleased? Always the questioning of self. And so over the years, you just start questioning yourself because you can't trust yourself. In order to hear from God, you got to get affirmation that you heard from God by going to them to ask permission. And so it's not that you don't want godly counsel, but the godly counsel is outweighed in hearing God and being led by God. You're led by them, not by God. And so it was just so much. So we ended up getting out because we went to Haiti. Haiti was great. And she asked me and my husband to be missionaries. We don't mind that, right? We're the type like, we're going to pray about it. Alan came to Haiti. He really enjoyed Haiti. We really were going to leave. We had set up, we going as missionaries, We talked to our landlord. But when we're in Haiti, the second time, not the first time, the second time where she leads the trip, the first time it was me and a couple other sisters that went with her, but we went with other people. So they were leading the trip. When she led the trip, don't post no pictures without permission. Don't share any information. So when you go to Haiti or places like that, you generally don't stay, like when you're on the people side and not the resort side, you stay in like other people's houses and stuff like that, right? And you pay them to stay there. They feed you all 3 meals and stuff like that. And so they also talk to you. And so I'm at the table with the guy. He's a doctor. He's been there for years. And so I'm asking like, so how does this work? Because I had went to the market and I'm like, well, I wouldn't feel safe like going to the ATM there. He was like, no, you wouldn't go to the ATM there. This is how that works. And so we're talking about mortgages. We're talking about, well, how do you pay your rent because money doesn't circulate the same way there. And so how do you get money? Like, does Amazon come here? Amazon didn't come here. That was a red flag for me. I don't know if I was ready to sacrifice like that. Just to be honest, like I was like, Amazon don't deliver? Like, how long it take? Now, I had been on another mission trip to Alaska, and you had to catch a boat to go to Walmart.
Right.
No, not to go in, to go to Walmart.
Oh, wow.
There are no stores. It was one store on the island, right?
Wow.
And so I'm familiar with missions, right? So I'm asking questions. Next thing I know, I'm in her now. Before normally it's in the office. I'm in the bedroom she's staying in, and she's like, "Why would you ask that? You have no right and authority. Anything you get here will come from me. You don't need to be asking any questions. Do you not trust me?" And I'm looking at her like, "You want me to come?" I ain't say this because you say anything, she's just gonna beat you down verbally even more. And I'm like, at this point, I'm just flabbergasted.
Wow.
I'm like, what? You want me to come to another country and depend only on you? Yeah, no, I ain't set up like that. I'm not like set up like that in general. Like how I ended up, my mother used to always be like how you end up there? Like you ain't even like, you didn't pay attention when I said stuff. Like how you end up there?
Right.
And so that was like our one mark. we in the back of the van in Haiti, and I'm just like, I'm singing Kanye, ain't no way one woman should have all this power. And Alan's like, hush your mouth. Just
you
stop.
started singing it?
I was singing it. Like I don't have, I'm trying to tell y'all, how I lasted here was simply like God had a plan because I don't have a chill. Like I was singing it. And so, because I'm just like, I paid to come on this trip.
Wow.
I can't go anywhere without your permission. I can't do anything. But that was just a reflection of home. And so when you're home, they will always say, we're not in your house. We don't do this. We don't do that. When do we ever ask you for money? And we looking at her like, you's a lying heifer. Y'all always asking for money. It's always a greater sacrifice, a greater need for the kingdom, right? If you're a married woman, you shouldn't be hanging out with the singles. If you're singles, you shouldn't be married out with the married folk. Why does that even matter? Like, why do people...
Wow. But
I have so many questions about the married single thing sometimes. But yeah, so that was
I
that.
wanted to ask you that
like,
too. And
then like 7 other people over like a 2-week period asked us why we were still there. And then we were just leaving initially because it was just a bad place. It felt very idolatrous. It was just too much control. And so we decided to leave because of the control. I went to my mentor who told me, stay for 3 years again. Because I had been going, no one knew that she's the therapist. So I would often meet with her anyway, just to catch up, see what's going on. And so this time she said, so I have a question for you. We have had these conversations, especially about this woman in that church for a while. And she was like, I'm really, she's like, I'm so sorry I told you to go there. She was like, I'm really disappointed in him because she knew him. She knew the pastor. And she said, I had no idea it was anything like that. And so she said, but I have a question at this point because, you know, you need to make some decisions. Why are you still there? And I said, the people. And that was when I realized I had an idol, right? Because I work in almost a sense, not that you worship the people, but you desire the relationship with the people more than you desire a healthy relationship with the Lord. And so when I said the people, I immediately said, oh, that's idolatry. Right. And so that was my wake up call. Alan wasn't all the way woken up yet because he was like, yeah, you know, we can leave soon. And I was like, yeah, no, this ain't working. So he was like, all right, well, let's see how we can leave it. Like, what's the proper way to leave a church? Because he had, you know, when he left his church was a family church, but he moved. So it's a little bit different. And so I was like, all right, so we Googling and we couldn't, everybody like, you know, talk and sit down and talk. And I was like, yeah, no, them conversations don't go well at all. Because for years we were told when people left, generally don't talk to them. Like you banish people. Even and then you get this whole conversation about, you know, why they left and all that kind of stuff. And that turned into a whole lot of other stuff. And so I think it was really, for me, it was really so many people questioning why we were still there. I had some friends come in from town that I had hooked up to help run her conference, right? She did this conference every year. Oh, she had been told me I couldn't serve on a worship team and all that kind of stuff. She told me I couldn't serve on a worship team. It was the greatest day of my life. I ran out screaming and hollering, yes, I'm not on the soundboard no more. Because I had been on the soundboard every Sunday, Wednesday for like 5 or 6 years, or maybe honestly more, right? And so she was like, you're happy? Hell yeah, I'm happy. And so my friends came in, did the conference. She told me I couldn't talk to them about business, right, while they were there. It was an interesting request, but it was her. So it was like, all right, whatever. Minding my business. I'm at the hotel at the conference. So my friends, as soon as the conference was over, they was like, hey, we don't leave out of town until, you know, tomorrow. We want to have dinner with you and Alan. My friend sat me down. They said, leave. Run. This bitch crazy. Like, because they had experienced her, and they was, you know, these are believers, but it was so intense. They was like, yeah, no, this is a white girl, black guy from 2 different states. They were both like, yeah, no, we've seen this before. She was like, no matter what they say they're gonna do for you, no matter how they say they're gonna elevate you, no matter how they say they're gonna let your gifting do this, and, you know, let the Lord, it's never gonna happen. Y'all need to leave. You know, we're trained, whatever, you know. We've heard this before. But me and Alan keep kind of like talking about it. Some other stuff happened. And the next thing you know, more people started saying it in like a 2-3 week span. It was like 2-3 weeks. So finally we did this, like we said, looking it up. And none of what we saw was what we were dealing with. And then we came across this one article. And this was after a couple days of searching, like a week of searching and not finding anything. And then I found this, it said how to leave a healthy church, how to leave a church, but it was like how to leave a healthy church or something like that. And so it was an article about church abuse and how you should exit a church with church abuse. And as I'm reading the article, I'm like, that's us. I felt like they had been there. And then at the bottom of it, that book, The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse, was attached. And I told you I'm a reader. I downloaded the book. And ended up reading the book on, like, when I'm in church reading the book. Like,
yes.
This is
wow.
I was like, this is it. You know, me and Alan at night, I was like, Alan, listen to this paragraph. Yo, this is us. This is us.
Wow.
And so that's a part of my journey. It's a lot of. I was reading. So we left the weekend of the anniversary, the church anniversary, right? And church anniversary, you know, normally like 2-3 days generally. Yeah. And so I'm reading the whole church anniversary. And I'm in this joint. I ain't paying no attention. It look like a circus in this joint. They ain't got guest preachers come out. Wow. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at them, and I'm reading this joint. I'm like, wow, that's these niggas. Oh yeah, it's time to go. Because we were trying to leave peaceably. Yeah. We just wanted to write an email. We were instructed, do not have a conversation with them. They're gonna jam y'all up in this office, and mentally you're gonna be worse than what you thought you would be. And so Yeah, we wrote the email, and next thing I know, we were told we was snatching babies from the church. You know, we were preying on the young, because other people, I told people followed us, right? Not followed us, but they, you asked me why we leaving.
Yeah.
I didn't even tell them. I said, here's the article.
Wow.
If you resonate,
wow.
you resonate.
Wow.
And so since then, besides the people who have left or have been considering leaving, I have not talked to any of them.
Wow.
Because they've banished me. Now, I also went on Facebook and followed all them niggas too. Mainly because that's what you're told to do. A few Sundays before, she has everybody in the church stand up. Are you following such and such on Facebook? I don't even remember who the person was.
Wow.
Yeah. Y'all need to unfollow them. You're being disobedient. How are they going to come back to the Lord? The way they left was da-da-da-da. And so you discover like all of that stuff is a lie.
Right.
So tell me about your spiritual abuse journey.
Whoa. That was, I needed tea. Why didn't
tea?
you should have reminded me to bring my tea.
You want to take a break and get your tea?
No, we all right. Let's pull through this because my hands are like cold and stuff as you're sharing stuff that I definitely could resonate. So, yeah, I'm like, this is fresh for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm 5.5 years. It'll be 6 years out in November.
Yeah,
Tiayrra
I'm
is
like 6 months.
6 months, 5-6 months out the pen.
6 months out the pen.
It's crazy.
Did a 7-year bid.
You was there for 7 years?
Yeah, like
I didn't know
6,
you
7
stayed that long.
years. Yeah,
Oh,
I
that
was there like
sucks.
6, 7 years. So my story was a little different than how I came in. I was previously at a big church. Most of my life I've been in like small storehouse churches.
Y'all, I'm so sorry that the light keep changing.
Right.
I have it on my app. I need to close the app. I'm sure Kai is like, can you stop?
Girl.
We're not going to cut this. We're going to
right.
turn it off.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep it pushing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, growing up, I had always been in like smaller storefront churches, and then I went to a big like mega church, and I never clicked. I would go in when before altar call, I was out, and so once again, I was looking for a community. I wanted to serve in a local church because as an adult, I had never, been serving, and so that was one thing that I wanted to serve.
Were you raised in the church?
Yeah, I was raised.
I was not raised in the church.
Yeah,
I wasn't raised in the church.
I mean, and my spiritual abuse predates even this situation. Now that I'm going back and just the damaging that it has done. So, anyway, I'm coming into this new church, and so I actually came in when there were like 2 splits that happened.
Oh, you came in at a split.
I came in at a split.
Now it makes sense. I remember your split.
Yeah, I don't know which one it was.
No, 7 years. I knew about your split.
Okay, so literally like the first Sunday I attended, because some of my friends were going there at first. The first Sunday I attended, I remember after church, like the pastor excusing people who weren't members. And then I left because I wasn't a member at the time. And so later down the line, I found out he was explaining like what happened with that first split. So that kind of happened. I'm still going, trying to, meet people and stuff. Because I was always that person that, like, just left after church. And so I would, like, force myself to, like, first I would stay, like, 5 minutes after church, right? Then it came to 10. Then, because then I'm like, well, let me just sit around and and then somebody would come up and walk to me.
How long would y'all stay after church?
Where? Oh, I mean, once I was in it, I would stay there sometimes the whole night till, like, 8, sometimes after Sunday.
Too.
Just build, and that's still something I was looking to. So
we be building. I'm only doing it in quotation marks because that is a sign
right.
of it. You don't have a life outside of it.
Yeah. So I'm coming in. I'm starting to get more acclimated, meeting people. By this time, ironically, I started getting close to people who left after the second split. Right.
Okay.
And so once they left, I was like warned. And still, I wasn't like a member, but I was warned of like the character flaws of leadership, things that were going on behind the scenes. So I'm like, whoa, like I don't want to come into drama. And so I had stopped going for a while, and I'm like praying. I'm like, Lord, like what do I do? And then part of it was, right, I didn't know if this person who had left.
Who was right or wrong?
Who was right or wrong, if this was slander, if this is truth, you know what I mean? And then I'm like, well, even if it is truth, sometimes people can change and repent, you know what I mean? And so do I then treat this person on the right? We say like give people the benefit of the doubt.
People the benefit of the doubt, and sometimes
and so then I'm like,
don't follow some of them warning signs.
Yeah. So I'm confused before I even go in. That should have been the first red flag. So I'm still just praying like, Lord, I don't, what do I do?
You know what? But it's a red flag, but it's almost like a yellow because some people leave churches hurt.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we talked about in the last. Yeah. And this is so as we want to say before, we want to distinguish between church hurt and spiritual abuse. Yeah. Those are two different things. Somebody can go to a church and they can have an issue with the leadership. They did something. That's one thing. This is not that. This is not I have one offense, two offenses against leadership. This is gross injustice and misuse of leadership.
So I mean that was kind of the foundation going in, and so ultimately I decided to start going, and I'm like, all right, my intentions, I'm like, well, I'm not trying to get close to the leadership or the behind the scenes anyway. I just want to serve, connect with the people, and be out, right?
Yeah.
So that was my intentions going in. And then those things that I was told, I just had them in my back pocket, knowing like this is what could potentially happen. So of course I get in the church, and it was almost like a fast track to getting close to leadership.
How long was that span?
Oh man, within like the first year or so, like I immediately was in like leadership meetings.
No, I'm saying like from the time that you were apprehensive to the time.
Oh, that was probably about a good summer till like New Year's. So I didn't go that whole summer.
Okay, that's not bad.
And then so probably from summer till New Year's, and then I remember New Year's, I just was like, yo, let me just start going.
My next question is, you ain't asked me no questions. You was asking me questions, right?
No.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I guess we'll ask questions later.
I'll ask questions later.
So
no, let me ask this question now because I won't forget it. Were you known for what you were doing? Because I think that's a good context question.
Of like outside of like
did he know?
So the person,
he or she know what you were.
Yeah, so that was another thing. The person that left and then that told me kind of everything, they were the reason I even got close to the pastor. So they were like, oh, like the pastor, you do art and all this stuff. So then it's like they kind of introduced us. Then they leave and split. So I'm like, what? Hold up.
Yeah.
So like within that first year, like I'm in leadership meetings and all this, and something in me, that's the thing where I
got to listen to that inside.
There's always that gut feeling where you just know certain stuff is off, but you don't know how to name it or whatever, right? And so I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I don't know really church protocol, but I'm like, y'all don't even know me like that, and I'm in here
y'all got me
serving
leading.
and in leadership meetings. So, but I'm like, this is what I wanted though. So I'm like, all right, well, whatever. I guess this is just a new kind of church experience. So, as time goes on, all the things that I'm being told, I'm starting to now see and experience. I'm just exaggerating stories, and which is lying. Anybody that exaggerates, that's lying,
y'all.
that's just
they really
a liar.
Be lying though.
So I'm seeing these things, experiencing like the love bombing, the just over flattering you, but then the sentences down was always the ask, right? Oh yeah, can you design this? Can you do this or that? So it's just like, okay. And at this time, in real time, y'all, I don't know what love bombing and manipulate. I don't know all these. So love bombing is just a tactic that narcissists, or not even narcissists, some people just do, where they just flatter you, over flattery, and just, oh my gosh, you're so loving, and very quick too, where it's like, you don't know me, but then on the back end of it too, there's always an ask for it. So they're gassing you up in a sense to then wheel you in, so then that they could extract whatever they want out of you, right?
And anybody can do that, not just
leadership. That's in love, any relationship. So I'm experiencing these things. One red flag too was, so I knew a lot of people, including you, outside of this church that knew of the leadership there, knew of the church. And everybody, y'all, that I talked to just had a bad experience.
I had to hold a bad. I had a bad
particular leadership. And so, after the first or second person, I'm still like, maybe this is slander. I don't know, But then
Everybody
after
got
like
the same thing
7,
to say.
8, 9, 10, I'm like, wait, now this is every time I bring. And so it even got to the point where I was almost like ashamed to mention what church I was going to, because I'm like, I don't know how people experience.
We stopped inviting people to church.
Yeah, well, I never really did that, but I don't know. So I'm like, okay, this is something's up here. You know what I mean? Like, at some point, this can't be all slander, especially when people's stories and experiences are very consistent and similar, right? And so as I'm hearing those now over the years, right, I'm reflecting on this stuff and remember what I heard when I first came in, but now I'm starting to see these things and experience these things, to manipulate. I remember towards the end, there was one incident where I had to address something that made me uncomfortable and I didn't like, right? And so I'm having this conversation with the leadership and I'm like lied to again, like blatantly lied to, where like I had the receipts in the text, you know what I mean, saying otherwise. But still in that moment, because it's leadership and the fear of speaking out and really like, yo, you're lying. You know what I mean? I'm just like listening. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go. Lying. Yeah, but in my mind, I'm like, yo, that's clearly like lying. So
that's a fabrication.
So that happened, and then another kind of red flag. It was like, other leaders were thrown under the bus. And then I was told, well, don't mention this. Don't talk to them. I'll talk to them about that. You know what I mean? So just this manipulation, this controlling. And so it was really like after that kind of conversation when I was like, oh yeah, I can't trust at all, right? And so I'm walking into this situation already at a little distrust and like watch your back. But now as I'm seeing these things, experiencing that, and then definitely after that conversation, I was like, oh yeah, I can't trust that. And so that began me disconnecting, right? Emotionally it started disconnecting, and then to the point of physically where I'm like, because what was happening was I was becoming this walking contradiction, right? And so, right, I'm showing up every Sunday with my body voting that this is cool, this is right, this is, but in my, inside, I'm like, this is not, like, same thing. I'm like, why am I here? What am I doing? And so I'm laughing, I'm joking, I'm putting on my own mask, right? Trying to just keep peace and, all these things in your mind, but like inwardly I am just like, something is not right, something's off, you know what I mean? And so right there, little things across, like you said, you see how other people are treated when they left. And so now that fear of like, okay, I know I don't want to be here anymore, but now is my character going to be assassinated if I leave? Like, how am I going to do this, right? And so what I tried to do, and part of me even moving to LA is because I knew that was the only way I could probably get out.
Go to different states.
If I said I was moving.
I want you to understand.
Right? Like, that's a lot of fear in it. Yeah, I want people to
understand. This is, so I'm currently helping someone now go through the process to get enough courage to leave. And it's almost like, and I never really thought about it like this before, but she's so deep in, it's almost like an abusive relationship. Like you have to consider everything that you're going to leave because it's no longer going to be there. So like you going to another state, that's what abused women and men do.
Yeah. They flee. And there was a lot of other factors. I don't want to just put it on that. It was a lot of other things going in Philly, but it was definitely one of them, because I'm like, oh yeah, if I, I'm looking at all the list. If I say I'm moving too, then I could just be out of there, right?
On the list, what's the list?
Just my list for wanting to just leave. And just in general, if you want to go, move. But I'm like trying to justify it, right? Because then I know I got to explain why I'm not going to be there, especially if I'm in a serving capacity. And so I'm just like, all right, and I think too, what was so hard, now I wasn't in, and there are degrees of spiritual abuse, and so I think you were probably at the very extreme end.
I thought I was extreme.
I was like at, the control, like I wasn't controlled. I was
at the second to next level. To the first level.
That is very
like
intense.
Level.
Yeah, mine wasn't as intense in her. Like I could still move around and be free in that, but just the psychological kind of aspect, and then the manipulation. It's still damaging, but it wasn't as severe. So then it was like, even when we're like, when I get to the point of like looking up stuff on spiritual abuse, and I'm looking up stuff too, somebody had recommended me that book, Subtle Power Abuse, and then you sent it to me again, and I'm reading through. So then I'm like confused. I'm like, I'm thinking spiritual abuse cults, like, ain't that bad.
I ain't a part
of no
what I mean?
Cult. Like, yeah, I ain't cult. Like, that's too extreme. But then it's like, and that's what's even hard, is the subtle stuff that you don't realize. Is like, yo, but this is not right. And I think ultimately it really started affecting my connection and my relationship to God, right? And so, I eventually was just like, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. And I didn't feel comfortable talking, directly to leadership. So I sent the email. And I sent the email.
Feel no guilt about no email, y'all.
And because I'm looking up stuff too, how to leave a church healthy.
Church, you can have the conversation.
Yeah, but in these situations, so I'm
like, manipulative pastor and leaders.
It's hard, and I'm talking, to other believers, like, what kind of assessing the situation. So I just ultimately sent the email, and kind of in the last paragraph of it, I was just like, hey, I know this is going to come as a surprise. Read it over, then get over. If you want to come back in a few days, like, let's do that, right? And that was immediately, like, broken, right? And I'm just, like, sent a barrage of... It wasn't listened to. Because, like, immediately, I'm, like, sent all these, text, like, paragraphs of text messages being called selfish and lone wolf Christian, and I'm not going to receive God's maximum blessings, and unloving, like all this stuff. And I'm like, something I expected, but in the moment it's just like, dag, like, you know what I mean? Like when you really kind of poke that button, then you see like what's really under, you know what I mean, this curtain of like, but then it's like, all right, you calling me all these things, but then like you calling me wanting me to come back, like why would you want a selfish, unloving person around you? Like, I'm toxic, you should get rid of me. You know what I mean? Like, so what's this pull where you're like condemning this person, but then wanting to still like pull them back in? And so I'm just like, yeah, I'm out, I gotta go. And so it has been a journey, I'm not gonna lie, especially too when you think about the people. And it's even something I've been thinking of, and I remember you saying in the other episode of like you repenting because of being a part of this community. It is a community, it's almost like a family, right? And so
it becomes your family. It
is. And I think it was I didn't leave when I knew I should have, because of the familiarity. And so I'm like, and then like people are asking like, well, what church home are you going to now? And I'm like, if somebody leaves a bad relationship, you're not like, oh, are you in a new relationship? Like, no, I'm
that's not the first thing you want to do. The first thing you want to do is not go to another church.
Yeah, which I'm not doing now. I am in church, but it's called group therapy. Okay, I am in therapy right now, and that is my ecclesia. And so it's a lot. It's still fresh. It is. It's good days. It's bad days. Just because. Not only am I having to just rethink this whole church thing, right? It's like my house in so many ways is being emptied. And that's like definitely one scripture that I am experiencing in real time and relating to, of like emptying this house, right? And then filling it back up. And so as my house is being emptied, I'm like seeing my favorite couch being dragged out. And I'm like, but I like that couch, right? But it's like that couch has to go. There's a few china cabinets that are still in there, that are rooted, that are cool. But there's a lot of things in a lot of rooms that are empty now. And so I'm like, what do I do now, Lord? Like, where does this go? Especially when this has been a part of your regimen and your routine and life. It's like Sundays, I'm just like, it was a while, like them first couple Sundays, just waking up, and
it took like a year.
And it's like,
it took like a year for me.
Yeah,
because we would go. So we started to visit churches probably like after 6-7 probably like 6-7 months out, just visiting, not really going anywhere consistently. And then we go visit a church, and you get out at 12:30, 1 o'clock, and you be like,
Yeah, like, oh, this is...
what I do the rest of my day?
Right, yeah.
Like, we can still get brunch.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, it's definitely a lot. I'm grateful that I did have a community of people, and believers around me that could help me through it and process and even go into therapy, because I understand most people don't necessarily have that, and they immediately do go to just isolation.
Isolation,
you know what I mean?
Or you end up in a church that's similar to the one you went. It just looked different.
Yeah.
So you think it looked different, and it's the same thing. It's just probably shiny.
Different. Yeah. And so, it's just a lot of unlearning, relearning, understanding, because the other thing too is there is a lot of truth in these environments that are being taught to some degree. But then, like we talked about on the other episode, it's the application of it. And what it came down for me was what was being preached was not being practiced in real time, right? And so what mattered was the outside of the cup, how things look. On the outside, it looked like a healthy church. And I'm like, I even remember one time sending the leadership like a text of like, because I was reading through Jeremiah before I even went to the church, of like bad shepherds and good, and how God's going to restore. And so I'm like going through this checklist one time, and I'm thinking like, yeah, they're doing that. Yeah, they're doing that. Yeah. And I sent them a text like, man, thank you for being good. Like, this is healthy thinking, right? But then it's like, after all of that, the gifting and the check marking off, and we're doing this and doing that, it's like, once again, when you bite into the fruit of someone and you really start to challenge or ask questions, then it's like, and so in theory, it's like, be like the Bereans and study and question and ask these questions. But then when you actually do it and realize like, oh no, who you think you are asking questions, right? Because there's this level of superiority where it's like, especially when someone, and we're kind of getting into some of the signs of it that we'll go into, but like when people start to position themselves and always saying stuff like, man, I just been sitting before the Lord all night, and I just been, fasting and praying. What that does is it starts to put you at this place where now people are like, oh, I'm gonna listen to them because they've been fasting for the last week, or they've been praying all night,
or
right?
They got a word of prophecy.
Yeah, and so then it spiritually, it's like, well, they're
higher,
spiritually up here. So
you're
like,
I wanted that maturity.
Yeah. Right? So I was just like, I'm unraveling all this, and I'm like, this ain't right.
And I was actually the whole time
right.
spiritually mature.
It's crazy. So I mean, I guess we can kind of get into some of the signs and effects of spiritual abuse for people who may be resonating with some of this stuff.
So this one, emotion churches only allowed to show one emotion of happy or rejoicing. 1 Thessalonians 5:16, any other emotion is shame, looked down on. So in the church that I was in, it was completely opposite. We were the issue of suffering for the gospel, right? Suffering was a good thing, right? As opposed to rejoicing, right? And so I think with emotion in churches, you have to, you need a healthy balance of both, right? And a church not being too happy, like Joel Osteen, right? Or too staunch, right? Yeah. We don't show any emotion.
So it still was one emotion. They were just showing this emotion of
we could show
sadness
any emotion.
And so
I never felt. Well, okay, yes. This is.
I'm saying congregants, leadership could write.
No. Let me tell you how it was. The catchphrase there was, your feelings are irrelevant. Right? So from our perspective, not rejoicing necessarily, not wanting to do something, suffering for the sake of the gospel at all costs. So I had to come out and get reprogrammed because I was feeling stuff. I read the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and I was like, my emotions matter. Yeah. And so so how did you experience that?
I think so. I was on the other extreme. We're on. These are extremes, and this is why the Lord says that a false a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but His just is in Just weight. His delight is in just balance and weight. And balance is so key in these things. And so like you just said, Chris, there has to be a balance, right? Where we're not all, hey, praise the Lord, you know, and then we're not all, you're going to hell. There's a balance, and there's a time for rebuke, there's a time for correct, and all those things. But it's heart and it's motive. And so I think on my end, I was on the extreme of just like most people being happy in a sense of like, oh, praise the Lord, blessed and highly favored. Nobody really knows each other if we really dig. And maybe on outside of the traditional Sunday services, there were people there that I connected with and I was talking to outside of church and building relationships. So it's not like that wasn't happening outside of Sunday, but generally it's like, you know, everybody's cool. You know, nothing, if you were to show, oh, I'm depressed or I have anxiety right now. Well, why are you not reading or you're not trusting the Lord? Like what's going on? You know what I mean? These emotions again, your emotions are seen as sinful in effect. And I always push back on that because I'm like, okay, Jesus, we can pretty much say had the best prayer life. You know, emotions are a big thing. If you show any type of anxiety or depression, something other than rejoicing in the Lord, it's like, oh, are you not praying enough? You're not getting word. Where's your devotion, right? Yeah. And so I push back on that idea because I'm like, okay, we can argue that Jesus had, I'm sure, the best prayer devotion life ever on the history of this earth, right? Yeah. Yet you have this scene of him in the garden praying in prayer. But sweating blood, which means this man was stressed beyond what we can ever maybe imagine stress to be, right? Him taking on the weight of the world. And so now would you go to Jesus and be like, why are you sweating, Jesus? Are you not praying? What's your devotional life looking like, right? And so that idea doesn't fly when you just say, oh, because you expressed this, where there could be a deeper need in that, and I expressed it. Our emotions are first an indicator that maybe love has been violated in some way, justice has been violated in some way, or an indication that, hey, you know, your check engine light is on, something needs to be adjusted, right? And so when we kind of do away and think our emotions, that's when we stuff, and you learn that in therapy, you stuff your emotions because you're like, no, I can't be angry as a Christian. You know, that's what I'm learning now. We're in anger week of therapy. And one of the things I express is like, I never express my anger because I'm thinking as a Christian, I can't show anger. I can't, you know, and there are healthy ways to do these things. But then even just the thought of speaking up for myself, you know what I mean? Or challenging something or expressing, I don't like this or I don't like that was just seen as like, oh no, you don't express anger. And so I push back on those things, and I think our emotions are just an indicator that we're human and that it's okay to be human.
It is very much so okay to be human, and for me to tell you to pull your mic down because it's touching your face.
It's still, look, we getting through it, y'all.
I think the emotions thing is also why it also is connected. You know, now we're talking about the signs of spiritual abuse. You can't challenge leadership. If you do, you're ultimately disobeying God. In theory, they're telling you to challenge them, but in practice, they get defensive. And so I think, and even the concept of challenging can simply be asking a question. Challenging can simply be saying, no, me and my family, we're not going to go. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, we would love to participate, but we don't think that's what we should participate in right now. Right? Having the choice, right, to exercise your boundaries, right? And so oftentimes I know for like I'm trying to tell y'all something. I'm talking to somebody right now, and I'm just amazed because I'm talking to my homeboy, and you know, we're all trying to collectively. I'm the spokesperson because I'm the only one she has courage to talk to right now. And so I'm just like, oh man, come on sis, use this side of your brain, not that side of your brain. I know you want to keep everything based on what they're saying. And she's like, you know, I don't want to leave yet because I don't want the hurt and the disappointment that is going to come, right, for the others. And I was like, sis, they're not going to be thinking about you, to be honest. Like, you need to protect yourself. When it's time for them to come out, we'll get them out. You and your household got to come out. And I think a bit of that is because after she was a person who challenged leadership. And so if you challenge leadership a nice amount of times and you keep getting beat, You know, it's like the monkey. You ever seen the thing with the monkey and the banana? A group of monkeys, right? So they have this banana, but they start to shock the monkeys when they try to come to get the banana. And so and then they put a new monkey in the cage and then that monkey tries to go get the banana. But then all the monkeys hold them back from trying to get that banana because they already got shocked. Yeah. And so it's a consistent cycle. Like a lot of times within these churches, and I'll challenge this for a lot of people, within these style churches, a lot of people will tell you to talk to the leadership before you leave. Right. Because that's the honorable thing to do, to do that. Right. A lot of times people have been talking to them for years about their issue. Yeah. And simply what they're going to do is beat you down even more and manipulate you even more because you're challenging them. And a part of the problem the entire time has been challenging them.
You can't talk to them, so then... Which is biblical, right? Which says you go to other elders and stuff in the church. And that was something I did, at least the people that I thought were saved. But I knew that there was a system, and that's another thing in some of these church. There's a system of men
all your business.
Leadership built in where nobody wants to challenge. So it's right. Like, well, we don't want nothing to do with it, but talk to lead. But it's like, if I'm doing a biblical thing.
Leadership, this is what I said. Why am I going to go talk to the person that's abusing me?
Yeah, oh.
That doesn't make sense. You would never go to ask an abuser, somebody being abused, to go talk to their abuser. Yeah. I was like, what am I talking about? I have just told them that they are idolatrous. What do I have to say? What if the Holy Spirit has not guided them in all of these years? What Christina gonna do?
Wow. Well, yeah.
And so everything is spiritual. If you suffer with anxiety, you touched on this, or mental disorders, then you are ashamed for not trusting God. False promises, come to Jesus and all your addictions will go away. The biggest lie ever is addictions, sexuality, identity issues, all of that, just lies. Coming to Jesus generally amplifies all of that stuff, right? There is a deep peace, but at the same time, transitioning your brain from one side to the other. And or some people will, or it'll be you can't drink at church, right? Can't drink alcohol. Where is that in the Bible? Somebody tell me. Because for years I did it, and it was like, oh, you shouldn't be drunk. Okay, all right, that's different, right? But even Paul even talks about you having your Christian liberties. Now, what you do with them might be good for you, and it might not be bad for you. But you can do anything, right? But in certain churches, they don't want you to do anything. Everything is a sin. Tattoos are a sin. Alcohol is a sin. Kissing before getting married is a sin. Everything is a sin. Like literally. Connection to God can only happen through prayer, right? Devotion, going to church, or not even that. You can only hear God through them. Hearing God, being led by God to do, can only be validated by what you take to them and then validating it for you.
Yeah, I was definitely told, like, this is the place where you're going to hear the Holy Spirit concerning your life. And the ones overprotect, or what is it they use the scripture, the ones overseeing your soul, and I'm just like, what soul? Like, nigga, you don't know my soul, you don't know me. Outside of knowing I do art,
they didn't know.
No one knew me.
So
it's not all their fault for not, but it was feeling safe enough to be like, but you don't. There were trust issues, and so it was just like there were times where I would try to be like open and have these honest discussions. It was just like nothing, but like once again, if you needed something done, then those are most of the times I got the text and the it's seeming like, oh yeah, let's talk or whatever. But it was just like if I tried to go deep, if I tried to go deep, it wasn't. And so I kind of accepted that wasn't going to happen there. But it was just like, you don't know my soul. Like, you don't know my struggles, my fear, like anything, So how could you be, overseeing a soul that you don't know? But I mean, the legalism and stuff, I don't know. Some people gotta approve who you date, and I saw a question of that the other day of like, oh, if your girlfriend's pastor said you have to he has to approve it for y'all to date or get married, what would you do? And the guy's like, oh, I would talk to the pastor and make sure everything's okay. And
I think a part of that is that pastors become spiritual fathers and mothers, right? It's that spiritual parentage. Stop.
I cussed in my spirit. I said,
But
mother.
that's a part of it. They become the spiritual home.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, and I'm on the fence about it. I don't think you should ask for permission, but I think there is safety in multiple people experiencing the person that you're interested in, whether leadership or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's more of the lens I take. You know, I tell my sisters and my brothers, like, if you're dating somebody, bring them around. Like, don't hide them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in Single and Anxious Part 2.
Yeah.
Like, don't hide them.
Yeah.
Right? But in spiritually abusive churches,
it's controlling, where it's like,
I know people who didn't get married or date people because they brought them in.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's
so
what I was going to ask you, because you and Alan started dating in that, so they didn't say anything?
So they thought, so they don't know me, right? So they thought that and people the first lady was not the pastor, but she functioned as the pastor, but the pastor also functioned as a pastor at times too.
So it's a two-headed monster.
It's a two-headed monster.
Okay.
And people often put weight on her. I put the weight on equally on both of them, because he's complacent in it in a lot of ways, and turns a deaf ear specifically to what happens with the women. Yeah, so, you know, I brought him down because, you know, I was like, all right, I'm going to introduce you, ba ba bao, baki bao. And, you know, we didn't really, because, see, I had peeped game a long time ago. And so I knew I'm not looking for validation. I'm just introducing you, right? And so he went in and introduced himself and all that kind of stuff. I don't bring people around. I never brought nobody I dated around, y'all, ever in my life, in general. Right. And so on this trip, that was the October trip. And then on the November trip, he came to meet my family. Right. I was more concerned with what my family thought of him. So he met her, you know, she liked them and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, cool. But for us, it was fine because Alan is, you know, he has this very unassuming personality that I think people often kind of like, they
don't see him as a threat.
They don't see him as a threat. And I'm like, he worse than me in some cases. He's just more compassionate in the way he says stuff. But he's very direct. Alan is very direct, but he knows how to say things well. And so, I introduced him, but I intentionally didn't want to marry anyone in that church.
Yeah. I mean,
I needed somebody from somebody from outside.
Yeah.
And so, but I seen sisters and brothers bring people around that, you know, they would disapprove of, or people be trying to, like, I call it arranged marriages. There's a lot of arranged marriages in that church, right? I seen people, like, who should have been married a long time ago, not being, like, the baddest Jones, not being married. The baddest. Like, guys will come around, yo, what's up with such and such? Yeah, bro. I don't think she ever gonna leave this church. Wow. Like, one guy who was pursuing her, this one girl, and she was being pursued by him, and she really liked him, and he really liked her. But they had the conversation about what church they would potentially go to. And she was like, yeah, would you come here? And he was like, no, I ain't coming there.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that ended that. Right? And so oftentimes people will choose their churches over life. Like family, friends, potential family and friends. Yeah. And so we're gonna link a lot of show notes. I'm pretty sure we're gonna wrap this maybe once a season. We'll probably, because it's almost like an update. What? It's not about spiritual abuse, but your journey and your growth.
Oh yeah. I'm cool with that. I ain't trying to rehash this though.
No. We ain't never going back to this one. Now I need you to prepare yourself for all.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lifelong journey. Yeah,
this is gonna be the one that people are gonna ask the most questions about.
Cause it's heavy. I know we probably done ran over an hour. It's a lot. It's still a lot to cover, but
we got plenty of resources for you guys.
Yeah, please check them below. A lot of stuff we might have mentioned.
We'll put some therapy contacts in there. Yeah. I've got podcasts. I've got video. Therapy. I've got articles. I got therapy recommendations. I got it all. But there's stages to it, and so some people are in the I hate church and Jesus stage, and some people are in the I think I need to get out, I don't know how to get out stage. Yeah. And so I'm always trying to encourage people, like, don't let that toxic faith be how you remember who God is, right? we still need the body of Christ.
Yeah.
I think it's how we need them. And you know what we could probably talk about, not necessarily this topic, but kind of like our backgrounds that led us into something like this.
Yeah.
Because your background
really
has a
good.
lot to do
It
with
does.
it.
It really
they
does.
prey on people who don't come from healthy homes.
It really does.
Because you're looking for that deep affirmation.
Right.
And you're looking to belong somewhere. And so, and sometimes it's just that they're doing.
They're good at look, manipulation is called manipulation for a reason.
Yeah.
And some people are just good
Some people
at
are
what
masters
they
at
do and just being subtle. Like I said, in my thing, and sometimes it's still a shock to the body because it's like.
Your body keeps the score.
You know?
Your body keeps the score.
Yeah, it definitely did. I definitely had those, like I said, initial gut things where I knew something was off and just, you get little punchlines that's thrown in a sermon. That's another form.
Oh yeah,
of spiritual
talking
abuse,
about you without using your name from the pulpit.
That's another
throwing you in the sermon.
tactic.
Yep.
Just foul, man. But yeah, God bless America. I guess. It's a lot. So
you said that popped off something else. It's like that too. Dag, I forgot. You said, oh man.
What about throwing your name in the sermon?
Oh yeah, I got my name put in sermons all the time.
Yeah.
No, it was before that.
Oh, what, therapy?
No, you said a couple of things since then.
Okay.
It's fine. It's whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, triggers. Your body keeps the score.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now I've been talking to several people who've gotten out, and now because I was so you're deeply connected with people, and so working with someone else, my sleep is messed up. And I said, hold up, my sleep was fine.
Yeah.
Okay. My body is keeping score of it because oftentimes for me, anxiety shows up in a restless night. And so so it's so many caveats to it, and you need therapy.
Yeah, I that's the only way I've been able to process. That's how I found my therapist, looking through, and I kept seeing this video pop up online, and I was just, after a while, because like especially when you're coming out, that was like all I was doing.
Oh yeah,
day and night. I'm like, spiritual
so if this is your first time here,
cults,
you're gonna hear all these links.
I was just so in it, and to the point where I was just exhausted. Like, this is so much, so overwhelming. And so by that time, I saw this video kept popping up about spiritual abuse, and I was like, I can't do it no more. Like, and a few days went by, I kept coming up, and I clicked on it, and I went through that one, and that just opened up even more. Like, whoa. So I started looking more, and now we'll talk about this on the mental health episode. So that's what led me. I'm glad that I'm there now to unpack these things, because I have a lot of questions, and there's a lot of foundational truths that are still, whether my body it keeps the score right, it's been operating in that way for so long, but now I'm having to retrain my cortex brain, that part and all that, and really be like, that's wrong. Just my view of how God loves me has been so distorted.
Yes.
So distorted. And that's why I said psychologically what this does to you is just ooh. So, man, I pray that,
Where the lavender, Kai?
Yeah, we need lavender. And this is not
the church bash.
Not the church bash, and not even to convince people. Like, now, if you feel you've had a lot of these things, and but at this point, you probably already know it's something off. Maybe we gave voice to it to confirm and validate you and what you've been feeling or that pain. But, it's not even to just tell people, oh, get out now. I trust that if you really are seeking after the Lord, he promises that he will save us from bad shepherds no matter what. And so whatever that timing is for you.
And as soon as the Holy Spirit give you that,
leave.
No, because it's the problem.
Courage. Well, you go ahead.
Here's the problem. We be stuck.
It is. Yeah.
And you'll be stuck for 4 years and 5 more years and 6 more years and 5 turning to 9 turning to 17 turning to 25.
Yeah.
Like, straight up.
Yeah.
And if it's if you have 2 or 3 of these signs, leave. Like, really leave.
Yeah. Go
talk to a therapist and let your therapist walk you out. But I'm trying to tell. If I would have
Yeah, Chris is like, no, we gotta.
I'm sorry. People need to be set free so that they can live freely in Jesus and find healthy churches to be a part of.
Yeah.
Like I think the biggest thing that I have a problem with, y'all, is the covering up of spiritual abuse by so many other church leaders, not just in those houses, but when they know when people coming out of them churches, and we got so much to say about everything else, but we don't say nothing about the unhealthy, toxic churches that exist. And so they just keep growing and keep populating. And one of the, we talked about this in the other episode, is unhealthy churches generally not linked to another church, so they don't have anyone to be able to hold them accountable. And I know it feels weird, you don't want to pick people, flock off, but I want people to live freely in Jesus and live an abundant life so that they can grow and become healthy and get out of these mental, psychological warfares. Like we be like, our battle is not against flesh and blood. It is not. And the church is not flesh and blood, it's spirit. And so when I'm encouraging people to take a look at where they are, right? If they're starting to bring up some of these signs, like it's one thing, like, and I know the difference between church hurt and offense and spiritual abuse. Right. If it's church hurt, I'm like, you should talk to your pastor or that leader or that brother or sister about that. Like, don't just flee. But if you are fearful, get up out of there. Get you a therapist, that somebody that don't know nobody, that so they can give you a balanced, healthy look at what you're going through. I'm sorry. I'm gonna tell you to leave.
Yeah, and that's typically, and I know we'll wrap this up, that happens too subtly. They will make the church the source, right? They won't explicitly say these things, but you get the scripture, don't forget, don't forsake the assembling of the brethren and all these, things. And so you're like, I can't, but I mean, these are mind games. Yeah, some of them got this stuff down to a T. The church is a resource. It's not our source.
The church is a place you should go to be healed, not damaged.
And
granted, you might get a couple bruises in the church because we human. Humanity is one thing. Mind control, spiritual abuse, manipulation, all of those things, narcissism, leave. And that's all we have for today. So what you listening to right now? What's your
jazz? Some Kenny G.
Some Kenny G.
Kenny G. Anything Kenny G.
You really listening to Kenny G?
And every now and then,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm listening to, you are always in something slow. I'm listening to Propaganda and DJ Mowski. Terraform, it's the People EP. So it's one of several that he's putting out. Okay. This is Propaganda's best work so far.
Okay. He's really cool.
I like Propaganda. Propaganda is amazing. I'm listening to Swoops No Grease. It's a mix. I mean, it's a single. Okay. And it's only like 2 minutes long, and I be like, dang. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
What you reading? She can't even think.
I can't think. Don't worry, y'all. I'm done.
Follow us on Instagram. We out here. We love you guys. We hope that this has helped you. There's some links and some resources in the bio. And run. If you need to run. Tell them Christina Faith sent you. All right. Bye. Love you guys.